Hello again, BookTube. It's Mike from Riff Raff's Reading Renaissance, and today I want to talk about a tag that Shelly Swearingen has tagged me and all of you in, called Worth Every Page, the Big Book Tag. And you can see on my screen here that Shelly doesn't say we might do it, Shelly says we must do it. The idea is to talk about at least 3 books that are chunkers, officially defined as 800 pages, but certainly in that range. Shelly gave us a little bit of leeway. And to talk about those that we think are worth every page despite their length. Part of my journey on Riff Raff's Reading Renaissance is to try and uncover the classics that perhaps have eluded me along the way. You'll see in my videos that I've tackled Moby Dick and succeeded there, but perhaps the biggest achievement of what actually spurred me into the whole process of reading and ultimately making these videos was the question of tackling some of the Russians. Now, I was thinking about doing a video called The Russians Are Coming, but perhaps I'll use Shelly's invitation to talk about chunkers to cover off the fact that I have read the Big Four, if I'm right in calling them Big Four. War and Peace, Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, obviously Anna Karenina, also by Leo Tolstoy, and the 2 biggies that you have to read from Dostoyevsky, Crime and Punishment, and the brothers Karamazov. Of the 4, and to anyone who's sort of still tackling or planning to tackle these challenges, I would strongly urge you to start with Anna Karenina for several reasons. I think Tolstoy is easier to enjoy and read, and Tolstoy is a storyteller, whereas Dostoyevsky, his main purpose is to make you think. So Anna Karenina is simply a fantastic story, and the biggest thing for me about reading Anna Karenina, first of all these daunting Russian novels, is that you realize that Tolstoy is thoroughly enjoyable and really easy to read. The chapters are short. The only thing is there's a lot of pages. So it's a bit like watching a soap opera. There's a lot of episodes, but they're not hard to get through and they're very enjoyable. So I would suggest one simply assigns oneself to the fact that you're going to be buddies with this book for a while. And I promise you, this is a rattlingly good story, and it does make you think, but it makes you think in a way that's entirely enjoyable and entertaining. The characters are incredibly well written. I'm trying to remember a phrase that was in here. I think it actually is probably in the other book about if history could write, it would write. Yeah, here it is. If the world could write by itself, it would write like Tolstoy. I think that's a fantastic introduction. So I'm sort of cheating. I'm using 2 Russian books here, and I don't know whether they're counting as 1 or 2, but Shelly did say at least 3, so we'll get away with it. But I would strongly say start with Anna Karenina. It's a fantastic gateway drug to the Russian novels, and of course War and Peace itself is perhaps the Mount Vesuvius of reading, but I did find it a thoroughly rewarding read. I'm sure that there's millions of videos on YouTube about what's in it and the cast of characters. The only thing I would say as a strong guide to helping to enjoy it, just trying to find where I did this, was I had the foresight to mark the cast of characters. Make sure your edition has a cast of characters, because there are many, many, many. Yeah, you'll see there's sort of principal characters. And what I did, which I found enormously helpful, was every time a new character appeared, you'll see my notations, I simply noted the page on which that character first appeared. So when you're 2/3 of the way through the book and there's suddenly a reference to someone and you have that moment of doubt where you think, do I know who that guy is? What's the context? You can refer back to your crib sheet and find, this guy arrived on page 328, and you can whip back to page 328 and get Tolstoy's very efficient paragraph or 2 of pen sketch of who this guy is and why he matters to the story. That I do think is a tip I would give to anyone reading these Russian novels with massive casts of characters. And the other tip I would give is that those of us who aren't experts at history, it's well worth just going on Wikipedia before you get into War and Peace, just to look up the story of Napoleon and the Russian invasion and that whole conflict. And again, I ended up with a crib sheet that literally just said, these are the key dates and these are the key events. And I kept this crib sheet in the book so that every time there was a reference to a year, Tolstoy talks about the year 12, by which, he means 1812, but they don't do the 18 for some reason. They just talk about year 7, year 12, etc. But you can always refer to your crib sheet and see that in 1803, the US buys Louisiana from France, the Napoleonic Wars start, Britain declares war on France. Little crib notes like that, just so that you keep the context of the story that's being told in the novel. So, if I'm allowed 3, then I guess it's the War and Peace and in Anna Karenina. I want to keep a special idea for number 3. So if I'm allowed more than 3, then I guess the two Dostoyevskys would probably count. I think they come in slightly in an undercount. 790 in the case of the Brothers K, and 562. That's a little bit shy. Crime and Punishment. I've got a note in the back of this book. It took me precisely a month to read this book. So I'm a slow reader, and I have a busy life, and reading has to try and, like water, it has to find all the gaps and crevices in that busy life so that I can keep reading. I personally, I think I preferred Crime and Punishment. It's a very good story about a man who commits a crime and then has an internal conflict. And it's a bit of a, not who done it, but is he going to get away with it, and what will happen, both in terms of the detective on his tail and his own inner torment. The Brothers K is a lot more philosophical, and although I think it's definitely a part of one's reading journey, if one wants to be well read and have exposed oneself to the fantastic Russian literature that's out there, I think probably of the 4 Russian chunkers I've shown, it might be number 4, to be honest. I think Anna Karenina is just a lovely book and lives in my heart. War and Peace, I do feel, is a rite of passage, and I'll always be very grateful for the experience of having read it. And then Crime and Punishment in 3rd slot, and Brothers K in 4th, if I had to pick the 4 of the Russians. For my 3rd book, I actually want to go into the musical side of my reading and talk about a book that I read as part of the research I did for a show we did. The poster of the show is behind us, so I'll turn around and show you the poster on the wall. And as you can see, it's about the history of protest music. I'm obviously a musician and quite heavily influenced towards the folk end of music, which is very akin to protest music. And therefore, the chunker I want to talk about is this. It's called 33 Revolutions per Minute, which is a pun on the fact that in the old days when we played LPs before CDs and streaming and all that stuff, the speed at which the LPs played was 33 1/3 revolutions. So it's a pun on the word revolutions. It is in fact a history of protest songs, and you will find in here, let's start with the credibility. It's 840 pages, so I think that qualifies. And you will find in the index everybody you can imagine who has written songs that are deemed to be protest music. Protest music isn't just sort of desperate folkies with long hair and flowers in their hair. You'll see from here that artists like Green Day with American Idiot, that's a protest song. The Manic Street Preachers, The Prodigy, Rage Against the Machine, Steve Earle, they're all in here. Public Enemy, Fight the Power. It starts from Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit, which is obviously a protest song about lynchings in the Deep South. Woody Guthrie's This Land Is Your Land is obviously in here as well. Bob Dylan's Masters of War, Nina Simone's Mississippi Goddam, Crosby, Stills and Young's protest song Ohio about the Kent State shootings. It literally takes you through the history from the early 30s, I think it says. Yeah. Dorian Lynskey explores the individuals, ideas, and events behind each song, showing how protest music has soundtracked and informed social change since the 30s. When we actually took our show round to the schools in this area and did a presentation on the history of protest music, I came up with a byline which I think works, and that is that if history is the story of mankind's struggle for betterment, then protest music is the soundtrack for that story. So I don't know if this is still in print, but dig it out if you're interested in protest music and a really interesting read of the stories behind each song. 33 1/3 revolutions per minute, Dorian Lynskey. So those are my chosen three: Anna Karenina, War and Peace, and 33 revolutions per minute. So I want to claim from Shelley all the bonus points for 2 classics and a work of non-fiction. Anyway, and even so, I haven't even mentioned Shelley's favourite, Middlemarch, which I've also read. So there you go. I do encourage people to tackle the chunkers. They're not as scary as they seem. They're normally worth the read. You just need to be realistic. I set myself a target of 25 pages a day and work out that, in fact, I will be friends with this book for between 1 and 2 months. But at the end of the day, you get to the other end and you're the richer for it. So thank you, BookTube, and we'll chat again soon. Bye-bye.